All right, welcome to the special meeting of the Board of Directors, November 17th, 2022, 10 a.m. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Chair Will O'Neill.
Here.
Vice Chair Heft.
Here.
Director Connors.
Here.
Director Hurt.
Here.
Director Minigar.
Present.
Director Reynolds. Director Vixora.
Here.
Alternate Campbell. Vice Chair Miller. Director Beal.
Here.
Director Chafee. Director Lombard. Director Murphy.
Here.
Director Trevor O'Neill. Director Voights.
Here.
Alternate Goebel. Director Kelly.
Here.
Director Khan. Director Penaloza. Director Taylor.
Here.
Director Wagner.
Here.
Director Chamberlain.
Here.
Director Reynolds. Director Chafee. Director Lombard. Director Trevor O'Neill. Director Khan. Director Penaloza. Mr. Chair, noting the absence of Director Reynolds, Director Chafee, Director Lombard, Director Trevor O'Neill, Director Khan, and Director Penaloza, we have quorum on both boards.
All right, thank you. So welcome to our first session of our strategic planning workshop. First, real quick, do we have any public live comments or live public comments?
There are no live public comments.
All right, thank you. So staff's worked very hard to develop panels and prepare presentations to facilitate our discussion today of the agency's strategic areas in order to provide direction on our vision, mission, goals, and objectives, along with the supporting activities over the next 7 fiscal years. The good news for a lot of us is we went pretty deep last year. And so a lot of this is going to be a discussion about how do we refine, how do we shape, and how do we make better what we worked on last year. So the outcomes of this workshop and later adoption of our strategic plans, as well as the annual updates, we all know they're critical to guiding the agencies as we move forward. And so staff acknowledge the time commitment they're requesting from the boards for this workshop. I would say it's entirely appropriate. And so I appreciate that. Again, last year, how deep we went. It was a 2-day workshop. This one's going to be one. And so with that, I'll turn it over to our acting CEO to introduce the first session. Ms. McFall.
Great. Thank you, Chair O'Neill. Good morning, directors, and welcome to your strategic planning session. Before I get in the details of what lies ahead for the day, I'd like to welcome Newport Beach's Chamber of Commerce CEO, Steve Rosansky, and he's going to say a few words for us this morning.
Good morning, everyone. As she said, I'm Steve Rosansky, President and CEO of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to our beautiful Marina Park facility here. We like to, I think Will said earlier, it's not a bad place. I like to refer to it as our window on the bay, as you can see, and we ordered up some great Chamber of Commerce weather for you today. Many people don't realize that this used to be a mobile home park that the city owned, and we converted it actually back when I was on city council, starting in the O's, I think, and finished it up afterwards. But we're happy to have this basically 3-block long facility here, and we're happy to have you folks here today to enjoy it. So Jeff Bott asked me to welcome you today, and I said, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it because I thought I was going to have some travel plans. I'd hoped to be in New Zealand in November here, but obviously I'm not there. But he did say, as an added incentive, if I did show up, that you guys might consider putting another item on your agenda about removing the toll at Newport Coast Road. I didn't see it here, Jeff. We'll have to talk about that afterwards. But first off, I want to thank the toll roads. The agency is being a partner of the chamber. They are one of our members, and without the support of our members, we can't do the things that we do here in Newport Beach, representing the business community and the residents. To a large degree, we do a dozen major civic events a year here on behalf of the city and the residents. I also want to thank Councilmember O'Neill for representing us here on the board and serving as the chair of the 73 toll roads. I think this is your second year, Will? No, I mean as chair. First year as chair. Oh, okay, well, feels longer. Well, you got another year to go. So Good luck with that. I also want to thank all of you for serving in your various capacities. I know as a council member, you're pulled in many different directions, and this is not in your cities, but obviously it affects all of our cities. So with that being said, I know you have a lot of important business to transact, so I'll let you get to it. I do want to invite you back though, December 14th to the 18th for the 114th annual Newport Beach Christmas Boat Parade. It's going to sail right by these windows here every night, and you're more than welcome to come as our guests. So thank you, and have a great meeting. Call me and we'll figure something out. Thank you all. Have fun.
Thank you, Steve. And again, thank you, Chair O'Neill, for hosting us in your beautiful facility and this beautiful venue. We really appreciate it. So as many of you recall, the boards adopted the agency's strategic plan earlier this year that highlights the agency's mission, its values, goals, objectives, and activities over a 7-year rolling horizon. Since its adoption, staff has been busily advancing the objectives that you've identified in your strategic plan. Today, we have, for the update, we've broken the planning session into 2 sessions. The first session will be moderated by, be a panel discussion moderated by Pat Jones on the future of transportation demand management. This afternoon, the second session will consist of staff providing presentations on your strategic plan and the 7 focus areas within that plan, looking at fiscal years 2024 through 2030. During these presentations, staff will be seeking your feedback and any input or recommended adjustments that will be incorporated into your plan. And then we will bring that updated plan to the board of directors in the next few months for adoption. So now, as we kick off the first session of the workshop, again, will be moderated by Pat Jones. Pat is the Executive Director and CEO of the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association, also known as IBTTA. IBTTA is a worldwide association for owners and operators of toll facilities and the businesses that serve them. Since assuming the position in 2002, Pat has built IBTTA into the principal advocate for toll finance transportation and the leader in producing high-quality educational experiences for toll industry professionals. IBTTA has and continues to be a strong partner for TCA and the other tolling agencies nationally as well as internationally, and provides an opportunity for tolling entities to collaborate and exchange information to advance the industry while improving mobility. And without further ado, I will now turn over the session to Pat Jones, who will introduce our keynote speaker and your panel members.
Thank you, Valerie, and good morning. It's great to be here, and it's great to see all of you. Chair O'Neill, Vice Chair Heft, Chair Wong, Vice Chair Muller, and members of the TCA boards, welcome. I don't think I will soon forget the names of the TCA board directors because I've heard them numerous times this morning. It's indelibly imprinted on my brain. Valerie, thank you again for inviting me to participate in this strategic planning workshops with the boards. I'm here at Valerie's invitation to facilitate a discussion about the future of transportation and demand management in Orange County. We hope these discussions will provide valuable information to you as you update the rolling 7-year strategic plans. As Valerie mentioned, I'm the Executive Director and CEO of the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association. And she also mentioned before that, I worked for the American Trucking Associations and the Health Insurance Association of America. I like to joke with my friends that having worked for the truckers and the health insurance industry, the natural progression for my career should have been to work for the National Rifle Association or the Tobacco Institute, but instead I chose the tolling industry. So we know everybody loves tolling, and we're going to delve a lot more into that today. I want to say a little bit more about IBTTA and what we do. As Valerie mentioned, next slide, please. IBTTA is the worldwide association for the owners and operators of toll facilities and the businesses that serve the industry. We have members in 20 countries on 6 continents, and IBTTA is the membership organization for people in the tolling industry. IBTTA is an advocate we're a convener, and we are an information resource. As a convener, we bring people together to learn from one another through our educational meetings, both in person and virtually. As an advocate, we represent the industry before policymakers, the media, and the public. And as an information resource, we collect data and create information products that provide valuable insights about our industry through TollMiner, our data visualization tool, and other resources. In the US, as you can see from the slide, IBTTA represents 130 toll operators in 34 states, operating 358 toll facilities with more than 6,500 centerline miles. In 2019, these organizations processed more than 8.3 billion transactions and collected more than $22 billion in toll revenues to invest in transportation facilities and operations. TCA is an important part of the tolling industry and of IBTTA's membership. TCA is the 18th largest public toll operator in the United States, measured by toll revenues, and the second largest operator in California. TCA is also the 22nd largest public toll operator in the United States, measured by transaction volume, and the second largest in California. As Valerie mentioned, the TCA staff have been very active in IBTTA, serving on our board of directors, on numerous committees and task forces, and planning and speaking at many IBTTA meetings. Today, we're going to be talking about travel demand management. So for purposes of this discussion, I'm going to use a relatively broad definition of TDM provided by the Federal Highway Administration. Managing demand is about providing travelers, regardless of whether they drive alone, with travel choices, such as work location, route, time of travel, and mode. In the broadest sense, demand management is defined as providing travelers with effective choices to improve travel mobility. Our goal today is to have you come away from this meeting with a greater understanding of the forces affecting the future of transportation and demand management here in Orange County. In addition, we hope you'll come away with a greater awareness of some of the many tools that are used for demand management today and in the future. In a few minutes, you'll hear from our keynote speaker, followed by a panel of experts who will share their perspectives on the forces acting on the future of transportation and demand management in Orange County. In this context, I think it's useful to think about some demographic projections developed by the Center for Demographic Research at California State University, Fullerton. In the period 2019 through 2050, the CDR expects population growth of 3.5% in the county, jobs growth of 10.7%, and housing growth of 14.4%. That's just a little baseline for the discussion and the conversations we'll be having today. Before we hear from the experts, we want to hear from you. In your packets is a piece of paper with a QR code. And I would ask you at this time to take out that piece of paper and with your smartphone, open up your camera to view the QR code and click on the link. So we're just going to wait a moment while you click on that link and activate your phones. We're going to do a little polling here, all right? Everybody have their Mentimeter dialed up here? You know, I'm a big believer in fun with purpose. You have serious business to do here at the agencies, but there's no reason that we can't have a little bit of fun too. So I'm going to start with a couple of softball questions. And the first one here is, in one or two words, how are you feeling right now? If you could enter into the polling app, Mentimeter, tell us one or two words about how you're feeling, press the submit button, and we're going to generate a word cloud here so we can we can get a sense of how the board feels right now.
Yeah, mine's is, yeah.
So we're not seeing anything, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Technical difficulties. Yeah. it's just a-
Not working, huh?
It's not working.
All right, that's a great idea. So we have dealt with a dysfunctional technology in the past, and I'm sure it will happen in the future. We will not be deterred by this. So, directors, could I hear, just shout out in your microphone or just, across to me. Tell me how you're feeling today. Anybody?
Excellent.
Excellent.
Looking at the water.
Looking at the water. Couldn't have a better view. Who else? Who else wants to contribute?
Relax.
Relaxed. Okay, excellent. What else?
Stress.
Stressed. Okay, we got relaxed and stressed. We have the entire spectrum here. All right. Busy. Okay.
No more election campaigns.
All right. Let's go on to our next question. Oh, yeah, here we go. I can do that. I can do that. Okay. Where are you from? This is a geography question. Where are folks from?
New York City.
Beautiful. Canada. All right. Where else? Kentucky. All right. Where else? All right. Moving right along. Okay. I want to get a sense of how long you've served on the board. Some of you are relative newcomers. Some of you have been around for a long time. Let me
6
see
years.
a show of hands. Who served on the board less than 3 years? Okay, just a couple. How about 3 to 6 years? All right. And more than 6 years. Okay, so we've got a good distribution of newbies and longtime veterans. Excellent. Here we go. Next slide, please. All right. Here's a good one. How would you rate your level of knowledge about transportation and demand management in Orange County? Let me see the lows. Who would say low? Okay, we've got a bunch of smart people in the room. How about medium? Medium, okay. And high. Who's got high knowledge of transportation and demand management? Okay, so we've got a good spectrum. That's great. All right, now we get to the hard stuff. When you think about the future of transportation and demand management in Orange County, what most concerns you? Let me have a word or a phrase. I'm sorry? Rena. Okay. The cost. Public acceptance. Great.
Public perception.
Great. Public perception. What else? What else concerns you when you think about the future and demand management? Sacramento. All right. That becomes a watchword for everything coming from the state legislature. Yeah. What else concerns you? All right. Final question, maybe a little bit easier. What would you most like to get out of today's workshop? We expected that. You're going to get a free lunch. All right. We can satisfy that desire. What else? New ideas. Okay, great. What else? Free lunch, new ideas. Recommitment. Yeah, congratulations on the great audit report today for both agencies. Terrific.
The cutting technology in Austria.
Cutting edge technology. What else would you like to get out of today? All right, well, that's good. We got free lunch. We got good vibes. Free lunch. All right, we are going to keep moving. We have a keynote speaker today. And Peter, I'm going to ask you to come up now so you can be sitting here while I introduce you and you can get settled in. I've known Peter Norton since 2014 when he and I met first at a meeting of the History Committee of the Transportation Research Board. Peter is an associate professor of history in the Department of Engineering and Society at the University of Virginia. He is a regular presenter at IBTTA's Leadership Academy. It's an intensive week-long course in which we run people in the tolling industry through a series of days and sessions to help them become better leaders in the tolling industry. Peter's also the author of numerous articles and 2 books. One is called Fighting Traffic, The Dawn of the Motor Age in the American City. And his most recent book is titled Autonorama, The Illusory Promise of High-Tech Driving. Would you all please join me in welcoming Peter Norton?
Thank you very much, Pat. And my thanks to the entire board for this invitation. I come from a county next door to Orange County. It's called Albemarle County. I'm talking about Orange County, Virginia, which has about 30,000 people. So this Orange County is quite different, and I'm enjoying getting a little bit acquainted with it and with Newport Beach. We heard an invocation this morning, which included an appeal for wisdom. And I have no wisdom to offer you, but we know that wisdom is the product of experience. Your personal decisions are informed by your successes and your failures in the past. And from that comes wisdom. And collectively, we have our shared history, which is our source of wisdom together. Of course, we have a tendency of forgetting our shared history or of even misremembering our shared history. And so the wisdom that I have to offer you today is certainly not mine, but it comes from some shared history. So although this talk is about the future of a resource, I don't think we will perceive that future rightly without some guidance from that history. I'd like to, I'm going to be inviting you all to answer a few questions as I go along. This is slightly interactive. When you see the questions coming up, I ask that you turn to a neighbor and see what you think the answer to this question might be, since I think that will be the most practical way to approach this. I'd like to begin with a little review of the subjects I'll be going through. These are the chapters of this talk. They'll take, if I've rehearsed successfully, about 5 minutes each. And I'd like to begin with a question that should be foremost in our minds right now, which is, what does tech really have to offer us? This is an ad from General Motors. It could be an ad, though, from numerous other automakers or tech companies that are offering us, for example, a future without congestion. In General Motors' case, they're actually saying they're committed to a future of 0 crashes, 0 congestion, and 0 emissions. It's not exactly clear how we get there, but tech is supposed to get us there. Tech like LiDAR, tech like 5G, tech like connected autonomous vehicles. And yet, so far, the results have not been very impressive. $100 billion and not a lot to show for it unless you live in suburban Phoenix. Yet there is tech that you know more about than I do, that's doing wonders and has been doing wonders for decades. It's been 19 years since London's congestion pricing program was introduced. You can see some of the data on its performance right there in that little box. And it is remarkably popular for a congestion charge. I certainly wouldn't begin to compare London to Orange County, but if we take the general lesson here, we may have a lot that we can gain from the technology that realigns the cost of road capacity to the people who use it. That realignment offers benefits that can be rewarding to drivers as well as to non-drivers. It can also be the means by which we pursue something that Pat Jones just said we should pursue, and then I heartily endorse, which is the possibility that we can again have choices, including environments where for now, there are no practical choices besides driving. Tolling or road user charging can restore choice to a people that has historically claimed to value freedom of choice. And that value is a value that crosses the whole political spectrum from conservative to liberal to progressive and to any other adjective you care to include. So the promise of this, I think, is really quite wonderful. And so I want to begin by asking us, what does tech really have to offer us? And to get us going there, I'm going to play a little game with you. You might turn to a neighbor and see what they have to say about this. I'm going to play a game I call, What Are We Reading About? I'm going to show you 3 sentences from a book. And I'm going to ask you, or you can ask each other, what are we reading about here? And here's clue number 1. Here's clue number 2. When you feel like you have an answer, or at least a plausible candidate answer, tell your neighbor. And third and final clue. And so offer an answer to a neighbor or ask a neighbor what their answer is. I'm going to proceed. This is about water. There was a day when people were charged for their water service by the number of taps in their household, and that's it. There was no incentive to fix a leaky faucet, and there was constant pressure on the municipal authorities to expand the reservoir, to raise the dam, to increase the infrastructure plant that supplied the water, because people were wasting it. People were using more water than they needed because there was no connection between the cost of the water supplied and what the consumer paid for it, which seemed in a way kind of attractive to the consumer. I don't have to pay for what I'm getting. But I think you can see how the overall effect was actually disadvantageous to everyone. So I'm going to take this text a little bit further. If you feel hopeless sometimes in Orange County, I think you can relate to this author's situation. The same thing is attempting to fill a pail which has a sieve for a bottom. I wonder if that sometimes feels like trying to meet ever expanding road demand by adding lanes. And the author of this book calls this the greatest folly of our time. Perhaps the greatest folly of our time is trying to meet ever-growing road capacity with uncharged roads. So what did they do about it? Take a guess yourselves. Talk to each other. What do you think they did that solved this problem? And it really did practically solve it. We still enjoy the benefits of this. How? A little bit of tech. I heard the word meter. That's it. Meter supply obviates the necessity for more reservoirs and pumping plant. Well, I think you can see how you could translate that immediately, can't you? Into charging road users for the cost of the road capacity that they use obviates the necessity for more lanes, what have you. So this is a problem that can be solved, right? This comes from a book, The Water Meter, from 1893. Tech solved this problem. Tech in the form of the water meter solved this problem. Tech in the form of road user charging or tolling may solve this problem of this sieve-bottomed bucket called road building that never seems to deliver what we hoped it would deliver, and for exactly the same reason, right? So a system of charging not based on the quantity actually used, this is a statement that could apply exactly to your business as well. I think I'm correct in saying that. I say that as an outsider. You are the insiders on this. Now, according to the author Walter Kent, when this happens, an injustice is done to some. An injustice is done to some. And I ask you, in road finance, where is the injustice when we have toll-free roads? Who gets more than they pay for and who gets less? I'll just let you consider that without actually conversing about it. And how do defenders of the status quo resist change? It may come as a surprise to you to learn that introducing water meters was the cause of mass public outrage, that people were going to have to pay for their water with meters when they had been used to being charged by the tap. You can see that kind of opposition in old headlines. Or take this second one from the Baltimore Sun, 1912. Take a look at that rather long headline. So if you sometimes feel, I heard the word public perception when Pat Jones had the questions for you all about what concerns you, public perceptions. Well, water companies, the water utilities had a public perception problem when they said we'd like people to pay for the water that they get. That outraged people too. You can see that in this Philadelphia Inquirer headline. Look at the cartoon. The water meter is attacking the honest, hardworking citizen here, right? Does this remind you of something? So how do defenders resist the change? They call it an injustice. But how do advocates of change, the advocates that include you are advocates of change. Because the status quo in this country is we don't really pay for the roads that we use. I don't have to tell you that the gas tax doesn't do that. You know that for a fact. So how do the advocates of change promote it? It can be done. It was done in the case of water meters. It's actually being done in more recent history in criticisms of the fact that we have supplied supposedly free parking, when in fact we know that parking is very expensive, and if you're not paying for it, someone else is. And there's actually quite a bit of popular support for this inefficient allocation of a resource. There's a author, professor, I think many of you have heard of him, from UCLA, Donald Shoup. He's the author of The High Cost of Free Parking. You might wonder, what kind of readership this book would have. It's an epic bestseller. You can't go to city planning programs in graduate school without reading about it. And look at the customer reviews here of this book. This book is loved. It's in its second edition. A lot of audiences I go to, this is the book they refer to as their number one go-to book on this subject, right? And I hope I won't be tactless to point out that when I Googled transportation corridor agencies and immediately a Google review comes up, do you want to know how many stars you've got? There were 170 reviews and the star rating was 1.6. Now, I think it could be a lot higher, and I think Donald Shoup may have something to offer you about how to get it higher, right? What if instead of just the high cost of free parking, we had the high cost of free driving? There's a high cost of toll-free driving, and it causes injustice. Remember Walter Kent's book on water meters? There is an inevitable injustice in people not paying for what they get because it means somebody else is paying for it instead. Is this not an opportunity for a 5-star review for the high cost of free driving? This is not a real book, but it could be. I'll bet some of you could write it or co-author it. And if Donald Shoup's book was a big success, think how much more of a success this would be. Because after all, parking is just a component of the driving system. Why not write The High Cost of Free Driving if you want a best-selling and change-making book? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the high cost of toll-free driving. The data in this public interest research group report is data that could inform a bestseller like The High Cost of Free Driving, but reports like this themselves do not make bestsellers, but the data in them could help make for a bestseller. They've issued a couple of reports that use data, I'm convinced, to prove that toll-free driving is a massive waste that promotes the problems that it purports to solve, very much like meter-free water service has the same kinds of effects. Here's a couple of excerpts from the book or the report that you see on the right there. User fees pay only about half the cost, right? Gasoline taxes are not user fees in any meaningless sense of the term, a message that I've heard Pat Jones bring to audiences as well. And unlike gasoline taxes, tolls are in fact true user fees. This is not the world we inherited from people who sold us roads as solutions to congestion. You build the road, we will solve congestion. This is an old message. It's a message that comes from the beneficiaries of the inequity by which some people pay for what other people benefit from. We could see this back in the 1940s. Here's a Portland Cement Association advertisement about how highways like this is the Davison Freeway, really the first urban freeway in America, built during World War II to get war workers to the plants in Detroit. And the promise here is that this is the cure. Toll-free roads are the cure. You know why they're not the cure, and it's for the same reason why meter-free water service will never solve anyone's water problems either. Promises come from many sources. I don't want to pick on any one of them because there's a wonderful range of candidates for that, including the Rubber Manufacturers Association representing the tire companies. This ad is from the Los Angeles Times, 1953. They're saying in 1960, you'll have congestion-free driving. Just look at the bottom picture, right? But if we can actually look, unlike people reading the LA Times in 1953, we can actually look at the city of 1960 or 61, Los Angeles, and here it is. So this is Los Angeles in 1961 for real, and it's not anything like the promise. And yet this kind of promise making is still with us now, right? We still hear that road capacity without road user charging of any kind is still going to somehow solve congestion. Well, that didn't work for water. It doesn't work for other resources either. And that's my refrain today, is that road capacity is a resource, not a commodity. And we can learn from how we managed other resources, including, for example, timber. This is timber when it was treated as an unlimited commodity that could be cut down and sent to market at will without any thought for the future. We see views like this from an era when timber was mined like iron ore rather than cultivated and managed like the resource that we think of timber today. Clear-cut forests, this is terrain that will then be subject to erosion. The forests will not come back. The value is lost. From a business point of view, this makes no sense. Certainly doesn't make sense from a conservation point of view or a public interest point of view either. This is short-term thinking in a world that has to adjust to long-term realities. Right. So compare that with, say, the Central Artery in Boston. Here is again, the Central Artery was a toll-free road through the middle of Boston. And you see, instead of clear-cutting forests, we're clear-cutting cities. And the Central Artery, as I think you all know, was ultimately removed and the road capacity moved underground, suggesting that we learned the hard way that this is not the way we meet or relieve traffic congestion in cities, right? Now, for forests, this meant the doctrine of conservation of natural resources sets in. And this conservation of natural resources idea was not just an idea from environmentalists, it was a business idea too. The idea was, if we want to continue to have a profitable business enterprise dependent on timber, then we cannot harvest it in ways that will threaten future supplies of that timber. Notice the clear-cutting stumps. We see, I think, equivalents in American cities in the form of clear-cutting of real estate in cities for the sake of parking. This is Queens, New York in 1972, for example. Neither one is an efficient allocation of resources, and both are attributable to the undervaluing of the resource that's being depleted, something that the tolling business knows something about redressing, right? As you saw before. So on the left there, you see Gifford Pinchot. He's the man who at least is credited with introducing the conservation of natural resources ethic into the United States. He was the first chief of the U.S. Forest Service under President Theodore Roosevelt. And through his conservation ethic, we can see the transformation of forest timber from a commodity that we deplete into a resource that we manage. And your subject for today is demand management of road capacity. We can talk therefore about road capacity as a resource to be managed. Here's forest cover in the USA over the first, say, 300 years. You can see rapid depletion of forest cover. After Gifford Pinchot begins to work at the U.S. Forest Service, his alliances with both business and environmentalists, and incidentally also hunters, gives us a situation where we actually have more forest cover in the 21st century than we had 100 years ago, without diminishing the business opportunities for timber either. As you can see, at least from the 50s through the 80s, there's a continuing growth in the value of timber products, despite the fact that deforestation has been substantially stopped and in some places, particularly in the East, reversed, right? So if we ask Gifford Pinchot himself, how does this work? I want to give you his answer from his 1907 article. I'm zooming in on this piece of it. And think about how this applies, this wisdom. Remember wisdom from the invocation this morning. How does this wisdom apply to your line of work? I think these statements apply to the resource that you manage as much as it applies to the resources that Gifford Pinchot managed. This is a message, I think, for you, as well as it was for people interested in the sustainability of our forest harvest. And incidentally, the word sustainability entered the language via the German from 1700, when sustainability was first introduced as a concept in forest management. And sustainability applies to any resource, including the one that you have to offer. So I ask you to reflect on what the significance of this resource conservation ethic is if you're in the transportation field, as you all are, right? So forest conservation, water conservation, we can have road capacity conservation as well. That's the missing middle here. We don't yet treat road capacity like we treat water supply or forest resources. Maybe we should, right? Now, why don't we? There's a revolutionary that you've never heard of, I feel sure. His name was Edward J. Marin. He was a civil engineer and a road builder. Was later, after this shot was taken, he became president of the Portland Cement Association, the trade association representing the cement industry and therefore the road builders of America. And he fought against this roads as a resource idea, which is an old idea. And he fought for the idea that roads are a commodity that can be supplied to an unlimited degree in response to road users who aren't even charged for what they have to offer. Now, Edward Marin was responding to threats to road builders like these, namely people being killed at increasing and alarming degrees, city streets becoming too dangerous for pedestrians, including children. You can see 3/4 of those killed in Philadelphia were children. That's in the 1920s. And you can see that the anger, this is a New York Times headline here, the anger was being directed at the automobile business and at motordom more generally, including road builders like Edward Marin. And this kind of public relations disaster was a threat to the future, the business interests of the future that Edward Marin represented. There were even proposals like this one in Cincinnati to require all automobiles to be equipped with a mechanical speed governor that would make it impossible to drive 25 miles an hour for the sake of safety. Edward Marin proposed something different as a way to protect the business interests of his members in the Portland Cement Association. And that was a radical revision in our conception of what a city street is for. And I should go back. And he's saying, let's supply unlimited road capacity and we're going to make urban highways safe for drivers. We're going to exclude pedestrians from them. with concrete roads from the Portland Simone Association, his trade association. And the thing that's going to make this work is the gasoline tax, which automobile interest groups got behind in a big way in the 1920s. The first state gasoline tax was Oregon's in 1919. By 1929, all 48 states had a gasoline tax. And the gasoline tax was loved by the road builders because of the fact that the more people drove, the more roads we got in response. To make that argument work, though, required the promise that roads would solve congestion problems. But in 1932, Pat Jones' organization, now the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association, then the American Toll Bridge Association said, wait a minute, gasoline taxes aren't the best way to pay for roads, and they offered a different model. The American Toll Bridge Association and member companies proved in the late 30s that toll roads work. The Merritt Parkway in Connecticut and the more famous Pennsylvania Turnpike in Pennsylvania demonstrated that they can offer first-class service for those who are willing to pay for the cost of the road capacity that they had to use. Toll systems were proving their worth, but they were a threat to the road builders who were interested in unlimited road capacity expansion. And they developed arguments that resonated with American culture about freedom of the American road being jeopardized if people actually paid for what they got. And this was a success in the sense that in 1939, Congress introduced a road measure called Toll Roads and Free Roads through this report, in which they came out strongly in favor of so-called free roads, by which, of course, they meant toll-free roads. These excerpts are from the National Highway Users Alliance, National Highway Users Association, now called the American Highway Users Alliance. And you can see the rhetoric that's being deployed, particularly the word freedom. And this rhetoric is being deployed against the idea that you should pay for what you get, which is a kind of interesting twist on freedom as we understand it. It comes, of course, from a conflation of the notions of economic freedom and political freedom, right? Because we use the word freedom both for political freedom and for cost or charge-free services, this is a rhetorical opportunity for the promoters of toll-free roads, right? And the interest groups line up behind toll-free gas tax roads, as you can see in these advertisements from Firestone and the American Trucking Associations and the Asphalt Institute. This is a broad coalition of interest groups behind toll-free roads, which are the same as meter-free water supply and don't work any better in solving the congestion that they're supposed to solve. This is kind of interesting in light of the fact of what President Eisenhower had in mind when he asked Congress to pass the Interstate Highway Act of 1956. People misremember this as Eisenhower calling for toll-free interstates. As you can see in this criticism in a Forbes article that says Eisenhower must be turning in his grave because of proposals for more toll roads. This is a misremembering of history, and as a historian, it's my duty to correct it. In his own memoirs, Mandate for Change, President Eisenhower said, I originally preferred a system of self-financing toll highways. All of the interstate highways were supposed to be tolled. All of them were supposed to be roads where you pay for the cost of the road capacity that they use. That was President Eisenhower's vision. For some reason, no one seems to remember this. Now, I think this means we have an opportunity for uniting conservatives and liberals in a country in which conservatives and liberals are notoriously divided and perhaps more divided than ever. And to exemplify how that could be done, I'd like to offer some wisdom from Alfred Kahn, an economist who proved how to do this. After all, conservatives believe that in a free market economy, people pay for what they get, right? And at the same time, liberals like for things to be affordable and equitable. And Alfred Kahn was like, why not both? And I'd like to offer you his wisdom about how you do that, right? You have to ask people to pay for what they get. And when you do that, you have both good business and good public service, something both liberals and conservatives can like. Now, long lines for steak, the equivalent of for you, of course, is congested traffic where you don't move along, right? The lower paragraph there is my attempt to translate Alfred Kahn's wisdom into the road supply business. Now, Alfred Kahn proved the wisdom of his ideas in being the man behind the deregulation of the airlines, which finally let airlines charge people for the cost of their seat, which opened up the possibilities for luxury service for those who want to pay for it, and also for economy and budget service for those who would prefer to be less comfortable and save money. The result was the deregulation of the airlines, which began in 1979, and it reduced airfares for everybody, including first-class passengers, because now the airlines could fill their planes. They weren't required to fly unprofitable routes. And the result was a kind of win-win, both for the people who were cost conscious and for the people who wanted first-class service. This is what gave us economy class fares. Many of you will remember People Express, for example. And we get choice. Remember Pat Jones' appeal for choices. Deregulation of airlines offered us choices. Now, perversely, we think of tolling as regulation, but what I think Alfred Kahn proved is that smart tolling is deregulation in effect, because smart tolling actually reconnects cost with price, and in so doing has the effect of what well-done deregulation does. And by the 1990s, as you could see in the picture on the right, tolling could also be unintrusive. You could keep driving while you're paying your toll. And this is what makes it practically possible to reconnect cost of road capacity with price paid for it without the cumbersome systems that you can see on the left on the Merritt Parkway in 1938. So this is an approach that presumably the most conservative economists I can think of, Milton Friedman, could stand behind, because it restores freedom of choice. And this is the inspiration for the title of Milton Friedman's book, Free to Choose. But are road users free to choose, right? In Orange County, it seems to me that your choices besides driving are not good, but at least you can pay for better service on the toll roads in Orange County, right? Now, I want to compare this with a quoted statement you can see in the red box on the bottom there that is actually not from Mr. Conservative economist Milton Friedman, but it comes instead from a very liberal hero. Incidentally, she's a hero of mine, Jane Jacobs, the author of Death and Life of Great American Cities, 1961, who was intensely critical of many of the conservative values in urban planning at her time, who is a liberal icon, and yet who is saying very much the same thing as Mr. Conservative Milton Friedman, where both of them are criticizing planners' utopias, whether those planners are in state departments of transportation or in the state offices that were responsible for urban planning. In both cases, they are standing for freedom of choice. Now, what could freedom of choice look like for transportation? Well, with tech, and remember my opening question is, what can tech do for us? We can offer people more choices than ever. Here's a random example. Here's a possibility of an app where your fair trade or free trade, FTM could mean either one, let's say free trade mobility, could be an opportunity for you as the road user to tell authorities where at least some of your toll revenue should go. Perhaps you want it all to go to roads. You could choose that, free to choose. Perhaps you'd like some of your road toll to go to buses or cycling or walkability. It should, and here's why. If you're driving, I don't think it's fair to interpret your driving as a demand specifically for driving if you're in an environment where you have no alternative but to drive. When I drive, and I do drive, and I drive reluctantly, I walked to Newport Beach from the airport because I like walking. It was a nice walk, beautiful day. I come from the East Coast, so I enjoyed the weather. But when I do drive, it's generally not because I chose to drive. It's because I didn't have any alternative to drive. And therefore, I resent my State Department of Transportation from interpreting my driving as it does, as a demand for driving. I'd like it to interpret my driving as a demand for transportation, and I'd like it to ask me where that money that I'm paying to drive should go. And I would love to have an app like this where I could choose to send some of that money, even just a small fraction of it, to support the modes that I personally prefer, like transit, cycling, and walking. So can tolling restore choices in car-dependent places? And with the greatest respect, I propose Orange County as an example of such a place. Can it empower citizens to crowdsource planning decisions? Can it promote sustainability, affordability, transport equity, employment access, community recovery, public health, and similar values? I think it can, and I think it can do it. I think road user charging or tolling is our only reasonable means of promoting these goals. And I think tech in the form of road user charging or other forms of tolling is what can do it. So I want to close with that beginning question again. What does tech really have to offer us? I want to say that it can unite conservatives and liberals in a country that desperately needs us to be reunited. You can see these values of liberals on the left and conservatives listed on the right, and road user charging or tolling can reunite these things. They've been divided, I would propose, artificially. And in the same way that the water meter could restore or solve a divide between the consumer and the supplier, I think road user charging can do that as well, if we recognize that not only water supply and forests or timber is a resource, but so is road capacity. Thank you very much.
Peter, thank you for that very thought-provoking presentation, getting to the root of many of the issues that we're talking about today. And I would invite the directors, if you have any questions for Peter, this would be a good time to do that before we move into the panel discussion. So questions for Peter about his presentation and some of the thought-provoking ideas he's presented.
So I also sit on Orange County Transportation Authority, and we're building the I-405 project right now. There's going to be express lanes on it. There was a huge battle over whether or not we should be able to toll those lanes. And the argument is our tax dollars have already paid to build them. Why would I have to pay again to use them? How do you overcome an argument like that?
I would love to know Pat Jones' answer to that question, because I know that's a question he and his team and his member companies deal with constantly as well. I do think that you have sort of truth on your side in the sense that we live in a country where people expect for most things to pay for what they get. And the fact of the matter is your taxes do not pay for the cost of the road capacity that you get. You know that something like 50% of or gas taxes cover something like 50% of the cost. And they do it in a very crude way too, because the cost of the specific road capacity that you're using is hardly at all related to what you actually pay for through the gasoline taxes. Now, that's a very tough message to explain, right, to people. This is why I offered Donald Shoup as an example, because he had the same challenge. His challenge was, how do I explain to people who enjoy the benefits of free parking that if you look at the whole picture, you're actually losing. Most people are losing. In other words, you're paying more in other ways for that supposedly free parking. That's a rhetorical argument that I think is hard to make. Donald Shoup has succeeded, at least to some degree, at making it. I have to hasten to add that although he has a large audience, it is a niche and distinctive audience. And so I don't want to give him, more credit than is appropriate for that. It's a tough message. Let me just close by saying there are people who prove that tough messages can be gotten across successfully. A favorite example of mine is Rachel Carson, who convinced a country that was using way too much DDT and other very lethal pesticides that in fact they were doing themselves harm. And her book, her bestseller of 1962, Silent Spring, changed minds. And so it takes a skill at storytelling And she demonstrated that skill. Donald Shoup, to a degree, has demonstrated that skill as well. And I think we need to learn from those examples.
And just one quick follow-up. So then the argument becomes, okay, and I know how OCTA did it. They did it without using tax dollars. They did it through bonding and private dollars. And that's how they got around. That lane was built with private dollars, not tax dollars. So we have the right to toll it. Now you have the argument from the other side. Well, this is the rich man's transportation because they can afford the toll. You know, people in lower income brackets can't afford it. So why should they benefit from that? It's not equitable anymore.
Right.
It's a,
I suspect that most of you have better answers to those criticisms than I have, just because you have to field them so often. I'm sure that's honed your skills at fielding such questions. But it reminds me of the situation that Alfred Kahn was up against when he was trying to figure out what to do when he was served on the Civil Aeronautics Board under President Carter as a way of to deregulate airlines. And he faced the same kind of criticism because, of course, one of the things the airlines all did was introduce, high-end service for those who are willing to pay for it. But at the same time, it freed up the marketplace for inexpensive things too. And I think road tolling can do that. You attract some of the premium road users off of the busier roads onto the premium roads, which presumably helps some of the people driving the toll-free roads. I think tech, though, offers us one more and largely unexploited possibility. I think we should be asking people where some fraction, I don't know if it's 1% or 10% of their toll should go, because we live in a country that likes to think of itself as a free country. What if I had an app on my phone where I could say, okay, I'm riding on this toll road, I'd like 5% of my toll to go to transit. I would pay that. I know maybe not more than 5% of people would do that. It could even be a surcharge on the toll. I would pay a surcharge voluntarily on every toll I pay, and that would go to sustainable and affordable mobility. And that's a possibility tech now makes pretty simple. It would be a beautiful thing if that actually happened, and that would then generate enough capacity on the affordable and sustainable mobility modes that they could then get the critical mass they need to become attractive the way they aren't so often now.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. Fascinating information. I loved seeing just how the history of transportation and all the different players over the years were involved. I definitely have had some discussions with my colleagues in my own city as far as the benefit that the toll roads do provide. Do you have any more modern resources? I mean, I could start quoting these authors from the 60s and everything, but anything that kind of speaks to, say, maybe just Orange County in general and how we're kind of a unique microcosm as far as like the demand and the fact that you just mentioned, we're going to have a population increase in the next 20 years that's going to really make us have to make some smart decisions regarding this?
Well, it's a great question. As a historian, I tend to, all of my go-to references in my head are typically decades old. I mean, to me, the single best source, in my opinion, that I had to offer you today was a water meter book from 1893, which shed some light on my nerdy fascinations in life. But, the invocation this morning was about wisdom, and one of the things about wisdom is that it's timeless. And the timelessness of wisdom means that we can have principles that are 1,000 or more years old that are as true in 2022 as they ever were. So I want to sort of double down on the old wisdom there. As for recent things, well, some of the tech I'm a huge fan of. Road user charging, I think, done right, can be the thing that reunites us as a country, at least in the transportation sector, because conservatives ought to love the, you pay for what you get idea, while liberals and progressives can love the possibilities that it finally unleashes for more equitable, affordable, healthful, and sustainable transportation. Off the top of my head, I can't refer you to a specific book or article. I will refer you to a journalist. There's a journalist named David Zipper and you can look him up online. And to me, he is the best transportation sector journalist going. He really digs deep, and he's very current. He knows the current stuff much better than I do. And so I would recommend following David Zipper's journalism online. I think you'll find it fascinating and illuminating.
So David, ZIPP.
Just like the
Okay.
Apparel device.
Yeah, exactly. And just to kind of piggyback on what you said, say wise, what was the term you just used?
Wisdom.
Common sense. In other words, decisions.
Yeah.
I would refer back to my colleague, Vice Chair Mueller, about how it's all coming from Sacramento, right? In California, we need to have common sense solutions to this problem.
Right.
All right, we'll go to Director Taylor and then Director Connors.
I guess it was on. Is the idea that of transportation demand management could be, other choices that you kind of referred to. Is there any precedent for a toll road agency in the United States or elsewhere partially funding, light rail or other options, or is this kind of a new concept that no one's gone there yet?
Probably some of you know more about this than me. I will say that the congestion charge that New York City is supposed to be implementing sometime soon is a congestion charge, some of the proceeds of which will support the MTA, the Mass Municipal Transportation Authority there that does the subways and the buses and some of the commuter rail. So yes, and New York City was sold on this in part on that basis that congestion charging I put it this way, we tend to interpret tolls as demands for driving, and I'm suggesting that tolls should be interpreted not as demands for driving, but rather as demands for mobility. And because of the fact that if you don't have an alternative to driving, we don't know what you would prefer. And I think this could be the way of reconnecting it. If the tolling can create choices, give us choices to operate from, then we at last do have something like a market that Milton Friedman might endorse as such. I know Alfred Kahn would, for choices. So like when you go into a supermarket, you have your choice of high-end coffee or cheap coffee or decaf or whatever you want. I'd love to see a future in this country where if I arrive in a new city like Newport Beach, I can drive a car or take a bike or take a bus. And I think it could do it.
Thank you. Director Connors.
Thank you. I really enjoyed and appreciated everything you had to say, except right at the start, I had a conflict with the water use, that somehow wasting water because you didn't have to pay for it is like wasting driving because you don't have to pay for it, because everybody drives because they need to get someplace. And then at the end, I was really pleased how you wrapped it up with driving being a demand for transportation or a demand for mobility. And I think our agency has actually looked at this or toyed with the edges of it as we try to figure out if we can use some of our toll revenues to help our member cities to enhance access to the toll roads. And we consider ourselves a transportation agency and a mobility agency and not just a roads agency. But I fear once again, Sacramento comes in, we may be constrained by our charter, by the legislation that brought us into existence in terms of what we can do with our toll revenues. But I really like the concept of what we can do with the revenues to enhance mobility besides roads. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Minigar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, I do have some observations and reflections on what you brought up. Socioeconomically, demographically, Orange County is quite different. Orange County is comprised of 34 cities And like my home city in South Orange County, we were incorporated in 1989, like a lot of other cities in South Orange County. So that we are basically new communities that people could afford to pay higher prices for their homes by migrating from Los Angeles County. Now in my home city, they come from the Bay Area because they can get the best, investment. Having said that, to compare what's going to be good with regard to the transportation demand management for Orange County as compared with Pennsylvania or New York or Massachusetts or what's good for Harris County in Texas or Clark County, Nevada is not going to be good for Orange County. We are different. My point from the whole discussion is that what works for those places, states, or toll agencies may not be suitable for us because of all those differences. Having said that, when we want to approach anything, we have to think global, but then act local. From that perspective, I do see that with any expansion or extension of the toll road systems, besides nobody's here from San Clemente. Besides the People's Republic of San Clemente, there are a lot of other agencies or other cities that would be very receptive to that. A lot of people in my home city have been using the toll road system, San Joaquin Hills 241, 261, and everybody's happy. I've never had any negative feedback, if you will, having served the public for 26 years. So we are in favor of the toll road system. And I think I could be spokesperson for a lot of those people. But obviously, I go back to, there are a lot of affluent people that live in South Orange County. We cannot ignore those people that cannot afford it. But from a mobility perspective, I think we have to make the best decisions that it is going to help other infrastructures, other freeways, for the people that cannot afford it to use it. So that's how I argue with a lot of people. Oh, you guys increase. I was at the reception. You guys increase the tolls on 73. And I said, look, you can reduce your stress. You can maximize your time by taking the toll road, but you have the free 405 and I-5 that you can use. Nobody's forcing you to use the toll road system. So in a nutshell, I think with the application of the new technologies, I do see that the future of Orange County is going to be very bright. And above all, as you know, with IIJA's passage last year, almost at this time, I think the transportation infrastructure is going to go through a complete renaissance, not only in Orange County in California, but in the country since 1956, when President Eisenhower signed the Highway, Interstate and Defense Act. So the future is very bright. And I think the takeaway for all of us from this workshop would be, as I said at the beginning, is to explore, to identify what are the new technologies that we as an organization that I'm very proud of, called TCA, can take advantage of it. We've been a pioneer, and why not to continue with a new generation of board leaders that are going to be in the leadership roles, to take advantage of that and to support it. So with that, just a few observations.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Chamberlain.
So I'll make an attempt to answer a couple questions that I heard from the state's perspective, being the only non-elected board member here.
Sacramento.
Yeah, we're here to help. So I'll start with that.
Here to help.
So the simple thing for me is, yes, toll revenue can fund non-highway projects and programs. So not necessarily TCA's legislation that created the agency, but any new toll facility going through 194, AB 194 does allow for that. It says any toll revenue collected in a corridor needs to be used to benefit the corridor to which it was collected upon. And that's a very broad interpretation, meaning you can pay for transit off system that shows a indirect or direct benefit to the corridor. Some would argue that it can even fund low-income housing, transit improvements, as long as there's a nexus to corridor improvements. So I think Sacramento and in DC, people are seeing this as a much more liberal view of what toll revenue can do when it comes to benefiting the transportation system. So again, state employee, and we are here to help. I will also say that I think the messaging is important. It took 20 minutes to lead us to what tolling can do and pricing can do. Non-elected here, but all of you are. And if we can't get the messaging across in 4 or 7 seconds on what the benefit is to the public, we have failed. Even being an appointed member of this board, if it takes me 20 minutes to talk about congestion pricing of the benefit, we're not going to be successful. So the messaging is already there. OCTA has crafted messaging on what tolling can be used for. The Department of Transportation has messaging, the 7-second sound bites on what the benefit to the users are. I'm a pricing advocate, but I'm not a pricing advocate in all scenarios. And I believe that, people that have something currently that is free, it is not an easy task to say, we're going to flip the switch and convert. And we need to be very strategic about how we think about converting to a priced system. So I think all of you know this, but I just wanted to throw it out there to say, look, simple messaging for me. 1 priced lane carries the same volume as 2 free lanes in the peak period. That's 7 seconds. So that's value statements to everybody. So those are the type of things that we all collectively have to be messaging. When you're talking a toll road, it's different than an express lane, and I realize that. And then the last thing I will say from the state's perspective is we understand not all toll facilities will make money. Some will be operating at a loss, or some will generate revenue to pay for part of the operations and maintenance. But they may not spin off a bunch of net revenue to use on transit in other areas. I would argue that there is still a benefit because we are building a new facility in some cases, if these are new lanes, at 10 cents on the dollar, if we're able to recoup some of the capital cost. So that's another, kind of view the state has when it comes to pricing. It is not about generating revenue. It's about managing congestion and doing more with what we have. So I'll leave you with that, but appreciate the presentation.
Thank you. All right. Okay.
Very good. Peter, please. We invite you to stay and participate in the panel. And now I'd like to invite the panel to come on up and we will begin the panel discussion. So welcome to the panel. I'm going to introduce them very briefly, one at a time, and ask them to introduce themselves with 3 to 5 minutes of remarks, presenting an initial view of your perspective on these issues of the future of transportation and demand management in Orange County. So Ginger, let's start with you. You're the founding partner of Blue Door Strategy and Research, providing expertise in transportation strategy, policy, research, and innovation. You've got a 35-year public service career with expertise spanning transportation engineering, transportation policy, applied research, and technology commercialization. So kick us off here. Give us a little bit of your perspective on the topics we've been talking about.
All right, good. Well, good morning. Thank you, Pat, for the introduction, and it's great to be here in this beautiful place. So I, just to expand a little bit more on what I have done in my career, I was with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute doing applied research, which is really a blend of academic and practitioner. And my primary area of research is road pricing broadly. So it includes managed lanes, express toll lanes, road user charging. But for the last 10 years, I have work directly with the Texas State Legislature. My role is to work with the Senate and House Transportation Committee chairs and their staff and interested legislators to bring research into practice, into the policy discussion. And most of it was around funding, funding strategies, funding needs, as well as emerging technology regulation, freight issues, and congestion mitigation. I tell you that because I understand, as I've been preparing for this and listening to this discussion, that the regulatory environment in Texas, as you probably know, is very different than what you're dealing with here. Just a little bit. Heard the term Sacramento. So we have Austin, but it's a little bit different. But I will tell you this, that even with a different regulatory framework in Texas, what we are experiencing there, and I come from the Austin region, is a tremendous amount of growth. We've doubled population every 20 years, for the last 60 years probably, and we will double again between now and 2050. And because of that, we do not have enough money. There's no way we have enough money to build our way out of congestion. So Austin, for example, is making unprecedented investments in transit, $7 billion transit program they're implementing right now. Express toll lanes, if they can get the governor to agree to move those along a little bit more. And you might say, well, that's the blueberry in the tomato soup that is Texas. But I'll say Houston, which is home to the infamous 24-lane Katy Freeway, has also recognized that they cannot keep up with the growth. And there is not enough money to build a system that can accommodate the growth. And so just this year, they've implemented a multimodal platform, technology platform, which is an app that allows and with multiple agencies. So this is Federal Highways, TxDOT, all the transit authorities in the region, the MPO, and the cities have come together to say we've got to find a way to incentivize behavior change and to provide tools to our users so that they can make informed choices. And so whether they want to take transit, carpooling, the toll authority is not involved yet, but I think that's on the horizon. But this is a 10-year rollout. This will be a 10-year implementation to provide a mobility as a service with a mobility wallet to be able to provide, to incentivize behavior change. So even in Houston, Texas, the land of no zoning, and some of the biggest freeways in the country have recognized they've got to do things differently. So I bring that perspective to the discussion, and I think I'll be answering some questions about travel behavior and the like. But I'm happy to be here and look forward to your questions in the further discussion.
Thanks, Ginger. Next up, Dan Lukasik. He's Vice President and Intelligent Transportation Systems Sector Leader for Parsons. He's an expert in connected and autonomous vehicles, advanced transportation management systems, active transportation management, and integrated corridor management. Dan, give us your perspective on these topics.
Yeah, the group that I lead within Parsons deploys intelligent transportation systems, which is basically the deployment of technology to improve the efficiency, safety of our roadway networks. Maybe an example that you see every day when you drive on the freeways and you see those message boards and they tell you the travel time. When you stop at the ramp meter, when you stop at the traffic signal, it's all software that's written by my group. Don't blame me when the travel time is wrong. It's just the bad sensors on the highway that are giving me bad data. But, you know, I think the biggest change that we're seeing is in the connected autonomous vehicle world. The way we collect data today about how our roadway is performing traditionally has been through sensors. Now it's coming right from the car. You don't know if you bought a GM car, that you've agreed to sell your data. I know when your airbag was deployed. I know when your brake was excessively deployed. I know when you accelerated or decelerated too quickly. So we know the accident immediately. We know the congestion level, how fast you're traveling, because we're getting it right from the car now. And secondly, the way we maybe disseminated information to you as a traveler was maybe a message board on a highway or a website. Now we're talking right to the car, right? We're able to send messages to the car. About Audi, it's capable of receiving information on signal phasing and timing, that there's an accident ahead of you. And if you're using navigation app like a Waze app, it's telling you which route to take, and it's getting that data from crowdsourced data. So it's really a change in how we're getting data and telling you how to travel. Another big initiative, especially in California, is integrated corridor management. And there's multiple corridors that are being managed in California today by looking at all the capacity available on all routes and modes. So if you're on a congested highway today, the unfortunate reality in California is there's probably multiple parallel routes that are operating at 10% of their available capacity. And there's a transit system that's also operating that. So now there's this balancing occurring to help really that congestion relief. And there's multiple corridors, I-105, 710, I-80, I-15 in San Diego, are all deploying these strategies to now balance that traffic. And your navigation app's already doing it. It knows that the primary route you're on is too congested. It starts telling you, take this other route. I see that's not congested. And what we're doing now is we're adjusting the signal timings on those other routes. They weren't timed to deal with twice the number of vehicles. And now we're actively managing that. And we're actually now telling you, hey, there's, on I-15, there's a parking right ahead of you. You could park, there's available parking, there's spot on the bus, jump in the bus, and doing that. And I think the last thing that the change that we're seeing is there's the capability for what I'll call proactive traffic management. Right now, everything's reactive. The way a DOT manages traffic, there's an accident, there's highway congestion, I'll do something about it now. Now the tools exist with AI and prediction to predict that there's unsafe conditions, to predict that traffic is building, and then do something about it beforehand to prevent that saturation of congestion from occurring in the first place. That's it.
Dan, thank you so much. Many of you know Damon Nagami. I think he has some history with TCA. He's a senior attorney with the Natural Resources Defense Council and the director of NRDC's Southern California Ecosystems Project. Damon, give us your perspective.
Thanks so much. Good morning. Good to see everyone. I think I'm here for at least two reasons. One is with regard to transportation demand management. I think environmental groups like my organization, NRDC, believe that TDM can be an incredibly useful tool for from an environmental and a sustainability perspective. So a lot of what Peter was saying really resonates. And, we, for example, have transportation experts who've been helping cities across the country implement TDM policies successfully. And you can see it in some of the results that we're really proud of. The elimination of pollution from urban transportation systems, helping make cities become more safer and more affordable, ensuring more equitable development in cities, helping to give small businesses more flexibility to adapt to changing conditions. I think another reason I'm here regarding the future of transportation in Orange County is that the fact that I'm sitting here is proof that environmentalists and transportation agencies like TCA can work together productively and collaboratively. If we can agree on and respect shared goals. So, for example, addressing mobility issues together without impinging upon critical open space and habitat resources here in Orange County. And that's coded language for, yes, I'm talking about improving connectivity south from the 241 terminus. Many new faces here. Some of you may know the history. Some of you may not. Not here to relitigate the past, but rather to celebrate that we got through it. It's pretty remarkable for me to be sitting here going from mortal enemies to collaborators. But it really took time to sort of break down those barriers and build that trust and rapport, and to be able to see different perspectives on both sides. So, I mean, the real reason I'm here is that Val asked me to be here, and who can say no to Val? So I am glad to be here, though, and it's been a great conversation so far, and I'm looking forward to the rest of it.
Thank you, Damon. Next up is Trent Warnke. He's the Senior Director of Energy and Charging at electric car maker Rivian. He's responsible for all products and services within the energy and charging ecosystem. Trent, give us your perspective, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, everybody, for inviting me to be here. It's been an interesting thing to listen into and learn. I'm probably the most outsider person in the room. I'm historically trained as an engineer. I've been recovering for that for many, many years, but my role really has always been looking at the vehicle side of the equation, right? So I've worked for multiple automakers, General Motors being one of them that you mentioned earlier. Then I went to Porsche, and now I'm at Rivian. And I've always tried to, my career has always been around how do we use technology to improve the experience of the automobile in many different ways. With Rivian, obviously, we're focused on electrification and bringing electric automobiles to the market, which we think is really important. And as you know, hopefully, we've got a truck and an SUV. And the way we think about it is people still want to buy trucks and SUVs. So we should provide them with a solution that is not only more environmentally friendly, but just more fun and better to drive. So that's really been our focus lately. However, I will mention that, you know, a lot of the things that we look at and we think about definitely play into everything you're talking about with congestion. For example, when we think about future technologies such as automated driving or those types of technologies that we can work into the automobile, it does allow for different ways to use automobiles in the future. So for example, thinking about the fact that, you know, cars in general are used less than 5% of the time, right? So utilization on this expensive asset is very low. We have to park them somewhere, we have to drive them somewhere. And so thinking about the future economies where you can easily share vehicles, where vehicles could someday potentially drive themselves. But even in that shared vehicle economy, I think there's a way to help alleviate some of the parking congestion and some of the other costs associated with the number of vehicles out in the market today. So I bring a little bit of that automotive manufacturer view with a lot of experience in the space. So happy to answer any questions related to that and hopefully provide some insights from that side of the equation. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Trent. And rounding out our panel of experts is Mark Delaverne. He's the Vice President of External Affairs and Project Development at Cavnu. He works closely with transportation officials from across the country and local project stakeholders to build the roadmap for the future of their roads. Mark, tell us a little bit more about Cavnu and your perspective on these issues.
Sure. Thanks, Pat. When Peter did his presentation, like one of the first slides was around the billions that have been put into vehicle technology. And, you know, lots of insanely smart people working on this problem. And they've all operated with the same premise that nothing can get done on the roads, right? So they have to solve for the roads themselves. And if you're well aware, right, like roads are different all over the place, and lots of crazy stuff can happen on the roads. So what we at Cavnu are doing is basically saying if we can, you know, design and build roads that simplify the environment for these vehicles and also provide more information, we can accelerate the deployment of these technologies and all the benefits that can potentially come from them, particularly around safety, efficiency, and overall experience. So we were founded about 2 years ago. Our flagship project's in Michigan, where we're working with the Michigan Department of Transportation to develop a first of its kind, essentially next generation express lane, where you know, if you have the right technology on your vehicle that has things like adaptive cruise control and lane centering and can receive a signal from us, that you get in the lane and not only just have the traditional benefits of an express lane around time, but also can take your hands off the wheel and your eyes off the road and do something other than driving. And, you know, a lot of potential benefits, you know, can come from that. We also believe that that's, you know, something people are going to be willing to pay for. You know, it's been proven that the people are willing to pay for time, but the idea of people being able to pay for time, but also to do something else in their vehicle when they're on the road. So in Michigan, we've been funding the entire project to this point. We're going to probably put a significant amount of money into that project. One of our investors is Ford, so working very closely with Ford on their roadmap and sort of how this begins to go into vehicles. Lots of different use cases that we're working on. We're working on autonomous trucking in Texas. Ginger has been part of those projects. Looking at some transit projects as well. And also, you know, Michigan was first for a number of reasons. Obviously, having Bill Ford excited about a project makes it a little bit easier to make happen. But we've actually been working here in California with Sandag and Caltrans on developing a similar type project. So, you know, it is kind of the sort of future, we believe, of what can happen, and, you know, lots of different opportunities.
Thank you, Mark. Peter Norton, everybody in the room knows you very well now. And I just want to ask if you have any observations about what your colleagues on the panel have said in the last few minutes.
Yes, I do. I particularly, of course, resonated with Damon's comments because Damon's in conservation, and my remarks today were proposing that we think of our road capacity as a resource, and resources must be managed in a way that conserves them. And if the resource is a public service, conserving them also is conducive to good public service. And of course, the resource of road capacity and the natural resources that NRDC stands for implicate each other quite significantly. And so in particular, those comments resonated quite a bit with me.
Thank you, Peter. I have a handful of questions that I'd like to ask the panel to sort of tease out some more of their perspectives on demand management. I encourage members of the boards, please get your questions ready because we'll turn to you in the not too distant future. So, Ginger, let's start with you. You are somebody who studies human behavior. Could you talk to us about what are some of the key drivers of likely future changes in travel behavior in the U.S. and Orange County?
Well, okay, so I bring a research background. I will say when it comes to travel behavior up until COVID, researchers had a pretty good handle on how to predict travel behavior. But COVID changed all of that, and people reevaluated their lives and their work and work-life balance, and that has disrupted our understanding of travel behavior. Most of the researchers that I talk to in this area say that they still need more time to observe what's happening. And I think, you know, things are still settling out in terms of work from home and the behaviors associated with that. I will say, though, that one thing we've noted also is that transit ridership has declined pretty significantly. I saw a statistic for Orange County that said that I think this was from September, that transit ridership is back to 88% of pre-COVID levels. So it's coming back. But what I have heard from researchers is that mainly the focus or most of the ridership has been those who are transit dependent, as opposed to those who are riding transit as an alternative choice. But I will say, after discussion last night with David Spears, we were sitting next to each other at dinner. He reminded me that it's very regional. And so I would expect you, as most toll authorities and other transportation agencies are monitoring the usage on your facilities. And as he was telling me, you pretty much, although you haven't recovered fully to the pre-COVID levels, you're getting there. And also the peaking patterns are pretty much consistent as they were before, which is different than what we hear in a lot of places, is that peak periods have changed because the nature of commuting has changed. So I think it points back to the context of what you have here is what's most important, and that you are monitoring that, and that you are evaluating how that's impacting your facilities. But I think that's bringing it from the US kind of down to the local level.
Thanks, Ginger. Dan, you talked to us earlier about how the way we perceive what's happening on the roadways is changing, that the vehicles themselves really are becoming the probes and the communication devices, not the roadway itself. Talk to us about what are some of the simplest and cheapest and most effective ways to manage transportation demand in the US and Orange County?
Aside from, a congestion pricing model like New York and London, I think that probably doesn't really work very well in California, especially in Orange County. I think it is something that I said earlier. It's about using all the capacity and modes together. Our transit systems aren't well used. They have lots of capacity. There's, as we drive along congested corridors, that are fully level of service E or F, there's actually parallel routes that are fully free flow that can take those cars. And so things are happening today, through connected vehicle, through, crowdsourced apps that are now telling you that, hey, that transit option is there for you. That alternate route is there for you. And agencies are now actively modifying, say, traffic signal timings to handle the additional capacity that's coming from your Waze or your other navigation apps, so which is very encouraging for me. I think people are now more prone to plan their travel ahead of time. If we could just get 5% of people to adjust the time that they leave or the route that they take, we greatly reduce congestion. And I think people are more prone to check that. People are more able now to arrive at work at different times, or maybe not even travel on that day. So I think these changes are there. Our younger people, they want mobility as a service. They don't necessarily want to own a car. They'd rather be on a scooter or a bike or take your Uber or Lyft and own that vehicle. I think that's a big change. Some of those changes are great for reducing congestion. Some aren't. But yeah, those are some of the things that I think are relevant here.
Thanks, Damon. I'm sorry. Thank you, Dan. Damon, as we were preparing for this conversation, we got a little bit into the realm of the mystical and religious. We talked about Richard Rohr and the whole notion of how we as Americans, we really tend to get into dualistic thinking, like it's either save the environment or build more roads. It's either let's have road transportation or we have transit. But you have encountered, I think, that getting to non-dualistic thinking is one of the ways that you've been able to become an ally with TCA and you've been able to work together. So maybe in that context, talk to us about what the adoption of environment, social, and governance principles will have on the future of U.S. transportation and here in Orange County.
Wow, it's a lot. I mean, in terms of that dualistic thinking you mentioned, that describes like the first, many years of the, the whole 241 saga. But once you get past that, then other opportunities open up. And I've just been grateful to be able to be creative, to try to think of some out of the box alternatives. But we don't get there until we sort of get past our differences and that dualistic thinking. So once you sort of get past that, just as an example, and I was encouraged, thank you, Ryan, good to see you again. It's been a while. To hear that, toll revenues can be used for other things if they benefit the corridor. That's encouraging. That's out of the box thinking. So just an example, once we entered into our settlement with TCA, we could start talking about creative ideas, and context matters. I grew up in Orange County. I understand what we have here and what we're up against. We got to start thinking about with your consultants, things like matching up where the job centers are with where people are living, and using data to try to figure out how to get people to where they're going when they want to go on your facility. So for example, folks who are driving into Irvine Spectrum, are there shuttles that we could pull together using data to figure out when those pickup and drop off times are going to be most beneficial to folks? And stuff like that can come up when you have sort of creative, when you have the creativity going, but also the collaboration and that trust building, which we certainly didn't have in the early days. But once we sort of resolved the 241 issues, we were able to have those creative discussions. So I think ESG policies are going to help. But even more than that, it's just getting to know each other and trying to find that sort of sweet spot and lane where environmental groups, sustainability advocates, and transportation agencies, and communities and cities and counties like yourselves, we can work together to try to find creative solutions based on the context of Orange County, like the specific locality where you are. And you kind of just need to know the communities. And so that's, I think, getting input from you all and your constituents is really key to that.
Other members of the panel, I want to see what observations you may have about the relationship between transportation providers and environmental interests. Anything that Damon said that piqued your interest that you'd like to reflect on?
Yeah, I guess I can add. I think that what you said really well that resonated with me was, it's not a zero-sum game, right? We need to be working together. It's not an or question. It can be an and question, right? How can we work on this together? And I will often invite the folks in the room as well as the folks on the panel to, keep the OEMs, the automakers of the vehicles in mind, right? Because we're a great data source. We're connected close with the consumer and customer that you're talking to and serving through your product, right? We're using your product. We're using our product on your product. So it's great to be able to think how we can work together to help solve those problems. And again, thinking about how we can use the vehicle as the medium to solve problems as opposed to being the problem. There's too many of them, right? How can we work together to think how creatively, how we can not do a zero-sum game, but instead figure out how to work together on these issues? I think that resonated with me.
Trent, while you've got the microphone, could you tell us a little bit more about not only the technology and the electric vehicles that Rivian is developing, but the source of the energy that powers those vehicles and how that relates to sustainability?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that question. So my current role at Rivian is all around our charging infrastructure and our energy solutions. So for me, this is really near and dear to my heart on how do we make sure that these customers of electric vehicles can now charge them because they're used to a model of fueling away from home. You go to a gas station, you fuel up. That's a different model than the electric vehicle, where generally if you have a charger at home, which the majority of our early customers do, the model is flipped. You're doing all your fueling at home. You wake up every day, you've got a full tank, right? You've got a full battery of electricity. It's just like an iPhone, right? You just charge it every night and you use it every day. And so the key for us though is Rivian and part of the way we think, and we're obviously based here in Orange County, so very happy to be here and this is our home. But thinking through what that means for the environment is really critical for us. And so I also have the privilege of not only leading our energy and charging team, but our renewable energy team. And we make sure that we're matching all of the electricity used in our vehicles with renewable electricity from renewable sources. And so a big part of what I do and what I focus on is thinking about how we can invest in renewable energy projects, net new to the grid in areas of the country where they're needed most. to serve our customers, to serve the planet, and make sure that our customers can feel good about driving their electric vehicle and know that, you know, they can dispel that argument that their neighbor has about you're just converting your gas, your vehicle was powered by gas, now it's powered by coal, right? And if you drive a Rivian, that's just absolutely not true, because we're making sure that every single mile you drive is matched with renewable energy through our charging platform and through our ecosystem. And we think about that in a way that we want our customers to invest with us into that renewable infrastructure, let's call it, or sustainable infrastructure. And so, yeah, it's really important to us to really think about that whole equation of the vehicle's life, not just the vehicle, but make sure that we're having a positive impact on the planet, which I think is really important to double down on.
Thanks, Trent. Mark, early in Peter's presentation, he sort of threw down the gauntlet on the whole idea of connectivity and talked about the tremendous investment that GM has made with, well, we wonder what the results are. Talk to us a little bit more about connectivity and automation, its relationship to demand management, but also the pace of change that we're likely to see in connectivity and automation.
That could be like a 4-hour ITS panel in itself. So I'll try and summarize. So and this is my own personal belief. So I'll give you a step back. So prior to this, I worked for the mayor of Detroit and led mobility for the mayor, and started work in like end of 2016. And this is when like autonomous vehicle hype was just starting to like climb. And he would just yell at me every month on why I didn't have like all these autonomous vehicles running through the city, because, you know, he was reading the same things and having to talk to him about, you know, all the challenges that exist with, you know, making a lot of these things happen. And, you know, and part of the challenge that has existed here is that, you know, folks like Trent who are building vehicles, our entire industry, and it's a monstrous industry with lots of different challenges of how you take idea to product. And then you've got folks like yourselves who operate roads who have a completely different bureaucracy and timeline and sort of how you do this. And it just hasn't worked. Like, people have talked about this and Dan's probably had many thoughts and frustrations on like why this hasn't worked. Because like the idea of providing a signal to a vehicle is not new. They've been talking about automated roads. They were doing a pilot in San Diego in like 1998 or something. Dan, what's about that year? Yeah. So like it's not a new concept, but it's just the bridge between these two just gigantic monoliths of OEMs are only going to sort of put a safety case together to say, I can trust this, right? I can trust that what I'm going to get from the road data, another vehicle, is something I can use and base a safety case on. And they just don't have that because they don't have the trust that like, I'm going to get the same thing in Orange County that I'm going to get in Oakland County in Michigan, that I'm going to get in Bucks County in Pennsylvania, right? Like they can't build product to all these different pieces. And that's been like one of the huge challenges that, you know, basically why our company is formed, is to kind of create that reliability across the country on different types of projects to get to scale. And it's a terribly hard business because somebody like Trent is like, great, you're doing 40 miles in Michigan. I need 10,000 miles across this country, right? And, you know, at the same time, right, like this is, you know, there are other things that have happened, even on the electrification piece of like where the charge is going to happen. And part of that came from solutions from Rivian saying, like, we're going to go out and build these things because we need it. And that's the essentially sort of premise of our company, is like, we're going to go out and work with companies like Rivian, companies like Ford, companies like GM, and then organizations like MDOT, TCA, Caltrans, and others to sort of like, we're going to begin to put all this together to make it work, because it's not like vehicles can't receive messages and be able to path plan and change how they go. It's just being able to get it to a point where there's scale in the future to be able to do so. So that said, after 2 years of doing this, like trying to put together a company that works with both OEMs and both governments is tremendously hard, and I wouldn't recommend anyone else do it because they are two very, very complex industries of how they sort of take idea to getting it out there. But you know, ultimately, to the potential that automated driving provides, particularly around safety, but also around efficiency. But then, opportunities on climate and opportunities on equity that exist there as well, is something that, we shouldn't just sort of say like, well, we haven't gotten it yet, so we need to quit. But I truly believe that roads need to be part of the solution. And I, probably over the next 5 to 20 years, I believe it's kind of point to point. It's not sort of this, vehicles are going to go all over the place and driverless. You're going to get in your vehicle, or right now you might be able to go hands off. And it tells you can take your hands off the wheel, where in the future you'll be able to say you can go 20 miles for hands off, eyes off experience. You'll get autonomous trucking on highways for a certain amount of miles, but you won't sort of have this overall robo taxis taking you around and chauffeuring you wherever you want. But it's hard not to, the challenge, right? And Peter's a historian, so you can kind of talk about all the things, right? Like people get excited about like the future sometimes, and sort of like, this stinks, this experience I have, and this is this picture that makes it super great. And sometimes like we get a little bit over our skis on that excitement and when we're going to get there, and just like how hard it is to get there. So that's kind of the, the biggest challenges that I think lots of people have, and particularly principals, get excited about like what the future can be and how it can be better. Because that's ultimately what we all want, is just to like have things be better.
Mark, you're talking about how hard everything is, makes me think of a scene from the movie A League of Their Own, in which Gina Davis, who plays this one character on a women's baseball team, wants to leave the team. And she says to Tom Hanks, the grizzled old manager, it's hard. It's just too hard. I wasn't expecting this. And Tom Hanks responds with, it's supposed to be hard. If it were easy, anybody could do it. It's the hard that makes it great, right? Dan, anything you want to add to what Mark was talking about in terms of autonomy and connectivity?
Well, I was smiling about the comment of A League of My. My sister was in the movie. She was one of the extras. She was trying out for the baseball team at Wrigley Field. I think on the autonomous side, it's an encouraging world for me. Of the 40,000 deaths on our roadway today, 90% are human error, right? And we need to take the human out of the picture. We always, I'll see a newscast about some Tesla that crashed, and all these autonomous vehicles mustn't be safe. And we keep forgetting about, on that same day, 100 other people died due to human error in a car. So I believe we need to get to the autonomous side to be safe. We need them to be connected to be safe. And I'm encouraged that the future is there to do that. We're all able to buy cars today that have these great forward collision warning, blind spot warning, lane departure warning. My company just equipped buses in San Diego with those features to prevent, all those things, blind spot, pedestrian warnings, bikes in the blind spot of the bus. All those sensors are now being added to buses to prevent those types of crashes. So, I'm really encouraged that automation is the answer to reducing these safety issues. And the other thing I'd say is I really wished we did something about cell phones and cell phone use. If you text in your drive, you've increased your chances of death by 23 times. A recent survey said, this is a scary stat, 8.2% of people have admitted to playing a game while driving in their car. And pedestrian deaths on our roads, people think, oh, our drivers are now ignoring pedestrians. It's actually the distracted pedestrian. They're buried in their cell phones, and they're walking across streets, and they're got headphones on, and they're not getting those audible clues to avoid that. So, I think we need to address those things as well for safety.
Thanks, Dan. Directors, please get your questions ready. I have one more question, and then I'm going to turn to the directors. Peter, you have spoken fervently on themes of choice and wisdom. And I suspect you may have something to say about the notion that 90% of our fatalities are human error, considering design and other elements. So anything you'd like to say about what you've heard recently?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I have a different point of view, and I offer it with the greatest respect to Dan and Mark. I think that the promise that high-tech driving will solve our problems, whether they're safety problems or other problems, has been a disastrous distraction. I appreciated Mark's reference, to Demo 97. That was the San Diego August 1997 demonstration of hands off the steering wheel driving as a series of Oldsmobile Toronados followed embedded magnets in the interstate north of San Diego, while their drivers flamboyantly held their hands off the steering wheel. The cars followed each other by a following distance of something like 8 or 10 feet while they were going 50 miles an hour. And this was supposed to prove how automated driving would solve congestion because the cars could be spaced so close together. But as every editorial columnist in the US responded right after this demo, that's great until you hit the exit ramp. And then where are all these trains of cars going to go? Wouldn't it be better just to call this what it is, a sort of high-tech, low-efficiency train, and work on that side instead of on the automated driving side? And you're right, Pat, I'd like to comment on the assertion that 90 or 94% is often cited of our automobile-related fatalities are attributable to human error. Well, human behavior and machine behavior interact so dynamically that it's impossible to isolate either one. And even the NHTSA report that initially reported this 94% number included a statement that's never quoted with it, namely, we don't fault the driver for these human error decisions because the human errors happen within contexts in which other factors are contributing factors. I could comment more, but instead I'll save us some time by saying, look for Phil Koopman's blog post about this. Phil Koopman of CMU, Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, has a wonderful little blog post about the 94% number. And if you Google Koopman, that's Koopman and 94%, you'll find it. And he is a person working and an expert on autonomous vehicles and a person who hopes to actually make them work. So it's not a cynic's point of view. What troubles me also to hear pedestrians assign some degree of responsibility for their own safety. Of course, they have responsibility for their own safety. They have the most at stake in their own safety. But the pedestrian fatalities that we have seen rising in this country particularly since 2009 have a lot to do with a legacy of a decision that was made in this country in the 1930s that nobody seems to remember, namely that instead of prioritizing low-speed traffic in cities and urban areas for the reason of safety, we would redesign our cities so as to make it possible to drive fast within city limits, which I propose has been disastrous for our urban environments, including in aspects of congestion and energy efficiency and emissions as well, because this has had the effect, our transportation policies have had the effect of protecting people's capacity to drive fast by interpreting delay as a public cost to be relieved at public expense. And then this at the same time has had the side effect, a very predictable side effect, of making all of our destinations grow ever further apart. And by making our destinations grow ever further apart, we've actually worsened our own traffic safety problem because that increases our exposure. The longer you have to drive, if you have to drive twice as far as you used to, but your car is twice as safe, you haven't gained any ground, right? Have you? I think we have a lot to learn from other countries. I'll cite the Netherlands, where they have 1/3 the death rate per on a population basis in traffic because of the fact that they have taken the opposite decision in urban areas, and that is to prioritize people who are not in vehicles. I think we could learn from that example. As you can tell, I could go on, but I better not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. We have about 20 minutes left in this panel discussion, and I'd love to open it up to the boards.
Great. So first, I'll just say real quick, Damon, appreciated your opening comments, especially the part where you're not going to try to relitigate. I remember the first part of that litigation being pretty expensive, so I appreciate that. Thanks for being here, by the way. It is a good signal of the relationships. I'm actually, Janine and I are on the San Joaquin, so we didn't have the pleasure of working on the 241, but I do appreciate that you're here. Vice Chair Miller first.
Yeah, Damian, I'm on 241, so I do remember it. And by the way, your lunch is not free. It's $28 million. Anyway, I'm just kidding. Mark, you said you were talking about the express lanes that, you know, they're not only just a toll, but they're also, you're looking at them being hands-free. How are you going to do that? Are you going to require hands-free? Because one of the things you get, and Mark Dan kind of hit on it, is that a lot of the errors, I think, in the autonomous space are not the car itself. It's the human error because the vehicle can't anticipate what I'm going to do erratically. Correct. So is that what you're looking at in terms of the hands-free express lanes? You require it to be hands-free?
No, so it wouldn't. So it would be essentially a lane that would allow all vehicles in. So it'd be a traditional express lane. And if your vehicle could get the signal, you would get the signal to allow it. And ultimately, the OEMs are the ones who would certify to say that you can take your hands off the vehicle and take your eyes off the road. It would not be us the one certifying. And you know, part of our solution is to put some physical separation between the express lane and the GP lanes, you know, to avoid that 70-mile-an-hour cut in, cut out, right? That's like we call late reveal that, you know, turns a lot of the systems off. A lot of it's also just providing information ahead, right? Like, so right now, if you get in a vehicle that offers hands off and you're driving 70 miles an hour, you reach a fairly tight radius, like the vehicle does not know when it goes around that radius if there's a vehicle stop there or not, right? So it just shuts off immediately and kicks back to the driver. So, you know, what our solution is basically providing sensors along the entire road so you can see the whole road. So vehicle gets in mile 1 of our 30-mile road, we can provide information of the entire 30 miles, right? So regardless of what innovation happens on LiDARs or radar, we're able to provide the full field of view and information back to the vehicle. So it's taking a lot of, you know, what was the promise of, like, if all vehicles are connected, we're able to sort of connect the corridor from what we see and the insights that we're able to provide, and then give that back to the vehicle itself.
Okay, so you don't think you could do that? Well, another question. When vehicles communicate to each other, is there a standard for that communication across the automotive industry?
So better question for Dan. Yes.
Okay. I was assuming that. So why would you need information on the road if all these vehicles are communicating? It just becomes a daisy chain of vehicles, right? I mean, it's going from one part of it.
No one trusts anyone else's source. And as well as just receiving information from other vehicles, you know, creates a lot of different other cybersecurity and other issues of what it's there. So basically, you know, all OEMs have a safety case, right? And ultimately have to say, like, that whatever we're trusting to build that safety case has to be true, right? So being able to essentially do it just from a sensor based, right? Of just saying, like, we're seeing everything that's happening on the road. Here's the latency that we provide you this information. Here's how in simulation, how often we pick up there's a tire in the road, right? And we hit that number. That's essentially what we're doing. And then being able to provide that to the OEMs to say, this is the ground truth that we're going to be able to provide you from an availability standpoint. As well as, you know, it does not, you know, this is the vehicles being able to communicate, even receive a signal, right, is still going to be really early on, right? When we launch this in Michigan, it's going to be a small number of vehicles. So without sort of getting started, right, and be able to provide this information, you're just not going to be able to get those benefits.
Okay. But
that's also why we need to have a mixed lane, because otherwise we're like idiots if we, you know, spent $100 million and 4 people were using our lane a day. We'd also go out of business very quickly. So.
Okay, thanks. One more question, Ginger. Yeah, I'm from Texas, and so in the Dallas area, so I know all those issues you're talking about because Austin and Houston have been through all that. How is Texas is interesting to me because they have so much land mass. I mean, there's a lot of room to grow around all those cities, and that's why it's happening so quickly. How are they dealing with public transit? Because for me, I love light rail. And I'm with Peter. I would take light rail everywhere if it was an option for me. I don't really particularly like driving my car, but I have it because I'd rather be in my car than sitting in a bus in traffic. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have is people don't want to get in mass transit if I'm going to sit in traffic anyway. So how is Texas or other cities, how built out cities? That's the problem with Orange County is we're completely built out. How do we go back in and try to fit those types of transportation services into the environment we're in today?
Yeah, I think it's super challenging. I will say this about Texas. Counties in Texas do not have any zoning authority, so it will just continue to sprawl ad infinitum. But what happens though in the urban areas is that they are able to, and I'm thinking about Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, all of those urban areas, are focusing on densifying the urban area within the core and in the immediate area around that. And then that makes it more amenable to transit services. We're seeing, particularly in Austin, a lot of new, extremely large high-rise buildings in downtown Austin that are housing. Now, we can get into a whole affordable housing issue as well, because, you know, those who can't afford to live there are going to continue to move out into the counties that continue to sprawl. And so then we continue to have that issue. The focus in Texas, I've seen this in Austin, Dallas, Houston, has been to use HOV lanes and manage lanes in the freeways to promote transit use. And I know in Austin, when the express lane opened up on the MOPAC, which is one of the major freeways in Austin, the transit ridership went up significantly. And it's because they could provide a travel time advantage. And so for the park and ride areas that are out in the suburban areas, they started increased usage. And so that's the approach that I think Texas is taking in a lot of areas.
Okay, so how do you see, I mean, park and rides work, I guess, if you can convince people to get into them. And I guess they're having some success. We have that success with it in Orange County as well. But how do you see, because for most people it's convenience, right? I mean, it's first, last mile trying to get to public transportation. If I got to take my car there, why don't I just keep going? Issues like that. But how do you see light rail factoring in? Because it's something we're doing in Orange County right now up in Santa Ana with the streetcar. And we're trying to understand, how do you expand that? And the price of it is outrageously expensive in California, especially because of land costs. But how do you see light rail or services like that factoring in?
Yeah, I think others on the panel might want to weigh in on that. But to me, what I've observed is that it's a long-term investment, and that over time, you'll start to create the densities that will support it adjacent to the rail line. But it's, at least what I've seen in Texas, it takes a long time to get that.
But what I'm saying is you already have the population density centers.
Right.
How do you figure out how to fit a light rail or something into that? Are you seeing strategies around it?
So you're talking about physically? How do you fit it in?
How do you get it
Yeah.
in?
So
I mean, I'm talking about more of a retrofit than designing a new urban area.
What we're seeing, for instance, in Austin is they're going to remove travel lanes and put light rail.
Okay.
So that's a policy decision to do that.
Okay, but you're starting to see people are starting to think about it and how to deal with that. Because that is something, and I take some heat about this because I like light rail. I mean, I love going to New York. I like Chicago. I like DC because I can jump on the subways and go. So I'm just wondering how you see urban areas like this and suburban areas like Orange County.
Trying to retrofit.
How do you retrofit into it? And what are the strategies some people are using to do it?
Yeah. Or tunneling, which is also going to happen in Austin as well.
Okay.
Which is extremely expensive.
Thanks.
All right, and in the absence of the chair, I'll go ahead and call on Director Taylor, who also has a question.
Yes, thank you. This this kind of overlaps a lot of different ideas, but and I want to talk about technology. I love the idea of technology, and I think it's really important that we're working towards the congestion problems by handling it that way. But is it like adding more lanes? It's just a modern day approach that eventually, with no matter what kind of technology we put at it, the number of lanes on the amount of congestion will finally meet a diminishing return, that it just won't, the capacity just won't handle it anymore, no matter what technology you throw at it. So that what leads me to the question, more environmental, then is there any circumstance where we could add more roads that the NRDC would be supportive of? So it's sort of the technology aspect are we finally going to reach a max capacity with technology, and then we're still going to be fighting the same problem? Thank you.
You have to like, right?
Yep.
No matter how small the thing you're trying to put through the pipe, eventually you can't get any more through the pipe. Like, it's just geometry, right? Like that just exists. No matter technology, if you made vehicles super small, right? Like at some point, right? Like the pipe's filled. So yeah, I mean, that's always going to happen. And I think that kind of goes to a lot of the demand management stuff, saying like, how's the best way to move people through, I won't say the pipe, corridors as best you can, as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, and I think adding to that, I think it's just multiple technology solutions. I mean, one of the things that really excites me is more the car sharing type of business model. Like already today, I can take my Rivian R1T, R1S, and I can email a friend or text a friend a key. So they don't even need to, I don't even need to physically even see them. I can just send them a key. They can get in my truck. They can go use it. We'll automatically switch their insurance over. So we're starting to take over these barriers to entry for kind of car sharing models. I think could really help alleviate congestion. And it's not a single silver bullet solution, but to your point, I think we're going to need multiple different technology types to incentivize the right behaviors to lower the congestion.
Yeah.
I think ultimately you're going to get to behavior change. And I think we've talked around this topic a little bit today. What I'm seeing in the academic world is an increased interest in applying behavioral science to transportation and finding out what are the incentives, disincentives, what incentivizes a change in behavior. I will use another example from Austin. This was about 10 years ago. We were asked to look at I-35, which is a major freeway through Austin. And we did a very, very sophisticated multi-resolution model of the region where we loaded it up for 20 years in the future for all the projected growth and economic growth, population growth, to find out what would happen on I-35 with that level of growth. And that included what was in the MPO's plan. So total build out. What was a 45-minute trip from downtown to a suburban community, Round Rock, became a 3-hour trip 20 years in the future. Now, we know nobody's going to take a 3-hour trip. Right. So something else is going to change, which means people are going to stop moving here. The economic growth is not going to happen. What we were asked then is to say, just take a hammer to the demand and see if you can get it back to a reasonable commute time. And we increased transit by 25%, reduced trips by 40% through teleworking. I mean, we figured up all of these different multiple things, which I think technology can help support, operations, everything, and we got it down. But it was the demand, it was taking the hammer to the demand model that made the big difference. There wasn't anything we could do to add more capacity, and it was just not feasible. Yeah. So I think what we're looking at, and again, I referenced Houston, it's looking at ways to use technology to give people choices, informed choices, and to provide incentives for them to modify their behavior. That's what they're starting to do in Houston. That's a platform that I think has been used in Europe, but I think that's the future of where we're going on the demand management side.
So we've got time, I think, for one more question. Vice Chair Heft.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about the pipe and how it eventually fills up. It reminds me of our issue in Orange County with our sheriff's contract. We have 13 contract cities, and it just seems like the bill gets higher every year. It's one of the biggest bills in our budgets, but the services don't increase. And it's an interesting correlation. My question is for Dan, and you said something a while ago about how there are different apps and different methods. You know, the one that comes to mind for me is Waze, where people can, find alternative routes. Well, one of the things I'm dealing with, and I'm sure some of my colleagues are, is that you've got constituents really upset because now they have a freeway running through their street or their neighborhood. And, it's nice to be able to have that alternate route to save you 10 minutes or whatever in your commute, but it's causing other problems. I was thinking you can maybe speak to that, please.
Yeah, I mean, we are working with ways to consume the data that they provide and give them data that helps improve some of these things. Some people hear of the term Waze traffic jam, which is that, Waze detects this route's very congested for you. It sees this secondary route is available, but then it directs everyone to that route, and then it becomes congested, and then those people get upset. So Waze is doing some very active things to solve that. And one of them is to work more actively with the agencies to maybe increase the capacity of traffic signals along that route. So now that arterial route maybe won't be as congested now that we've increased the green times because of that routing. So it's encouraging to see that. I don't know if we're going to solve the problem of people being upset that vehicles are being routed through their cities, other than when it does occur, we need to try to control it and manage it. If there's a major accident on a highway and you didn't have Waze, people reroute anyway. They were doing it before Waze, right? They were just doing it aimlessly. They didn't know what route to take. They were best guessing what the alternate route was, so at least, your navigation apps are giving some intelligent choice on the alternate route. We just need to get to the next step of getting the DOTs to get that information and say, oh my gosh, there's 3,000 more cars approaching my city right now. I can't do anything about it. Let me adjust my signal timings to account for it. And at least we'll give some relief to the driver.
And that's very interesting. And you made me think of something else to just kind of piggyback on that. I know something I've experienced. Thank goodness it hasn't hit Waze yet, but I know with Google Maps and I think some of the others, I would, type in an address and you get on the freeway and within like 2 exits, it says, get off and take, 42 streets to get there, 2 hours later. And you're like, well, it's about a 20-minute commute. Why is it making me do this? And I'm just kind of curious, what is the impetus behind that? If you or anyone else might know it, is it because the powers that be are trying to say, everybody needs to take public transportation because, we don't want you on the freeway? Or is there some other nebulous possibility as to why they would do that? Have you heard about this?
I don't think there's anything like that. I mean, they all have their algorithms that are trying to optimize your commute. And most of them are optimized to give you the lowest commute time. I can't imagine there's any.
Oh yeah. No, I knew it was a 45-minute drive. I was coming west on the 8th and it wanted me to get there 2.5 hours later. It wanted me to get off in the middle of nowhere in these little exits and keep driving. And I said, well, why don't I just keep going west and I'll hit the 15 and go north? It made no sense whatsoever. So I just think that's a very interesting observation about why they would orchestrate something to give you a route that's 4 times as long as it could be.
Well, we've gotten to my vice chair's favorite part of the day, which is our free lunch. And so, so on behalf of the board, thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much for speaking to us. This is the amount of information in this. It's really impressive. So to staff for putting this one together, thank you. This is awesome. So let's give a round of applause.
So directors, we will break now until 1:30. So we're adjourning now until 1:30. Yes. Okay. Thank you.